Like most people watching this video, I grew up learning English, but in school, I began learning Spanish. While learning the basics of Spanish, I realized that many of the words sounded similar to English. Verbs like practicar and estudiar have their counterparts of practice and study in English. For centuries, people have noticed similarities between languages, and these basic similarities are the basis for what is called a language family. A language family is a group of languages that are related to each other and share similarities, with Spanish and English being part of the same one. As I began to learn about language families, I started to be able to recognize what language would be in what family. But I never really knew why languages were in certain families and what differentiated one language family from another. Luckily, I wasn't alone in this search, and people have been studying linguistics for thousands of years. The first recorded instance of linguistics being studied is from the 6th century BC in modern day India by Panini. He classified the sounds of Sanskrit into consonants and vowels, as well as word classes like verbs and nouns. Throughout the centuries, linguists specializing in Greek, Arabic, and other languages helped explain their own languages and even some connections between closely related languages, but never saw the wider connections. Even though most of the original study of linguistics was by Eastern and Middle Eastern nations, the modern field of study is largely based around the European continent and scientific revolution. Early European linguists were fascinated by the biblical perspective of the Tower of Babel and trying to find a connection where all languages descended from ancient Hebrew. But eventually, new ideas began to enter the European sphere. In 1583, Jesuit missionary Thomas Stevens, an Englishman, reached India and said that many languages around Goa had pronunciation and structure that is allied to Greek and Latin. Later on, Paulus Marula made a list of words in Dutch and Persian to show how they were related. This helped add on to a theory that the Persian and Germanic languages were related. This theory eventually developed into the Scythian theory by Marcus Cyrus von Boxhorn in 1647, which stated that ancient Persians and Germans were both descended from ancient Scythians around modern-day Ukraine. Then in 1686, Andreas Ure stated, an ancient language, once spoken in the distant past in the area of the Caucasus Mountains, and spreading by waves of migration throughout Europe and Asia, had itself ceased to be spoken and left no linguistic monuments behind, but had, as a mother, generated a host of daughter languages, many of which, in turn, became mothers to further daughters. This was effectively the first concrete mention of what we today call a language family, and an extremely important moment in linguistics. Many more studies were conducted in the following century, but the most important linguist was William Jones, who pioneered the field of comparative linguistics. This is the study of comparing languages to find relations between them and form language families. Even though much of the work Jones conducted was incorrect, his work in comparing languages built the basis for the field of linguistics, which is still classifying languages into families to this day. Especially in the 1960s, a new wave of language study began to occur because of the use of recording devices, and the field began to specialize into linguistic typology. Linguistic typology is a field of linguistics that tries to find the connections between languages and what defines a language. It uses these similarities and differences between languages to classify languages into families. The other main way to classify languages into families is by genealogical linguistics, which is the way many linguists I mentioned try to classify languages. This way tries to find a common ancestor for languages, and the Europeans I mentioned, almost all, were working towards finding the common ancestor of the Indo-European language family. The languages of the Indo-European family were chosen to be part of the family because of similarities found through linguistic typology, and all are thought to be descended from one common ancestor language, which is called Proto-Indo-European. This combination of linguistic typology and genealogical linguistics is how all language families are debated and eventually said to be definitive families. I will go over each of these families in detail in a future video, but since I will be mentioning these families so much during this video, I will give a short overview of the largest language families. The most widespread language family that is spoken by the most people is the Indo-European language family in dark blue. This language family spreads through most of the Americas and Europe as well as much of South Asia and Oceania. Many of the largest and most well-known languages on Earth are part of this family, such as English, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Persian, and Hindi. Of course, the worldwide spread of these languages is mostly due to colonialism. The language family spoken by the second most people is the Sino-Tibetan family in light red. This family is mostly spoken in East and Southeast Asia. By far the most important language in this family is Mandarin, with the other important languages being the other Chinese languages like Wu and Cantonese, as well as Tibetan and Burmese. In green is the Afro-Asiatic language family, with famous languages such as Arabic, Hebrew, Amharic, and Hausa. In purplish pink is the Niger-Congo language family, which consists of the largest number of languages, with some of the most famous being Xhosa, Zulu, Yoruba, and Swahili. In dark red is the Turkish language family, which is spread throughout much of Asia, with languages such as Turkish, Kazakh, Uzbek, and Uyghur. In bright blue is the Austronesian family, spread across the Indian and Pacific Ocean, with languages such as Tagalog, Malay, and Indonesian. In brown is the Dravidian language family, with languages such as Tamil and Telugu. Now I will quickfire through a few more families, saying the color, name, and the most famous language. In yellow, Tai Kadai, with Thai. In purple, Austroasiatic, with Vietnamese. In light purple, Koreanic, with Korean. In dark purple, Japonic, with Japanese. In turquoise, Mongolic, with Mongolian. In light pink, Uralic, with Hungarian. In bluish purple, the Quechuan language family. And in yellow, the Mayan language family. Now, with an overview of the languages I will be talking about, let's go back to linguistic typology. I won't be talking too much about genealogical linguistics, because for basically every language family, the languages are thought to have descended from one language, called Proto, then the language family name. Because of the similarity between all language families, there really isn't much to talk about regarding genealogical linguistics. On the other hand, linguistic typology exists to find the different ways to group languages and language families. There are many different criteria considered in linguistic typology, but they can be divided into three main categories. The first category is phonetics, which is the sound used by language. Next is morphology, which is the way these sounds are formed into words. Finally, syntax is how these words are then formed into sentences and actual speech. Before I dive into each of these fields, I want to mention that the first rule of linguistics is that no rule is absolute. Every rule in linguistics will have an exception. Every border drawn on a map for language draws a line through a concept that lines can't be drawn through. And every aspect of language exists on a continua. Phonetics focuses on the sounds humans make and how these sounds are understood. This leads to the study of phonemes, which are a single sound, like a letter, instead of a morpheme, which is a small unit of sound that conveys meaning. This means, unlike morphology and syntax, the parts of language studied by phonetics don't have meaning by themselves. Only when each individual phoneme is combined with others do they actually have meaning. Since I am not a phoneticist, I needed a way to dumb down phonetics somewhat, and luckily, there is the perfect thing. The International Phonetic Alphabet, often known as the IPA, is just what I was looking for, as it categorizes every sound used in human language. This allows words from any language to be written phonetically and pronounced without even having any knowledge of the language. I won't cover absolutely every part of the IPA, but I will give an overview which will hopefully give you decent knowledge of phonetics. There are two main types of sounds used in the IPA, which you have definitely heard of: vowels and consonants. The difference between consonants and vowels is that vowels are made with little to no constriction of the vocal tract, while consonants do require some restriction of the vocal tract. This is why words need vowels, because you can't move from one consonant phoneme to another without opening the vocal tract and producing a vowel sound. Consonants are then further divided into pulmonic and non-pulmonic consonants. Pulmonic consonants require airflow from the lungs, and most consonants in language are pulmonic, with all consonants used in English being pulmonic. Non-pulmonic consonants are not based on airflow from the lungs and are very rare in language. First of all, let's cover the different types of pulmonic consonants. Every pulmonic consonant is classified by the place in the mouth where the sound is produced and the manner in which it is produced. Along the top of the chart are the different areas where the sounds are produced. Before I go over these areas, if you want to hear any sound I talk about, I will put a link to the IPA charts with recordings of each sound in the description. For each type of consonant, I will give an example of the letter used in a word in English. For these examples, I will use examples spoken in all dialects of English or in specifically an American dialect. The first area of sound creation is bilabial, which is a sound articulated with both lips. This is M in map or music. Labial dental is from the lower lips and upper teeth. This is F in fill. Lingual labial is from the tongue against the upper lips and is the rarest of the labial sounds. This is not used in English. Dental is the tongue against the upper lip. This is the N in words like month and tenth. Alveolar is the tongue against the front alveolar ridge, or the area where the back of your teeth meets your gums. This is the N in nice. Postalveolar is the tongue against the back alveolar ridge. This can be hard to distinguish from dental and alveolar. Retroflex is where the tongue is flat, concave, or curled, and is articulated between the alveolar bridge and the hard palate, or the roof of the mouth behind the alveolar ridge. This is the T in art. Palatal is where the tip of the tongue is against the hard palate. This is a CK in back. Velar is the back of the tongue against the soft palate. This is the K in kiss. Uvular is the back of the tongue against or near the uvula. This is the NG in sing. Pharyngeal is in the pharynx. This is not used in English. Glottal is in the glottis. This is the H in high. Both the glottis and pharynx are located where the mouth meets the throat. Each of these areas of articulation then must be matched with a method of articulation to create an actual phonetic sound. These manners of articulation are located along the side of the chart. Nasal manner is where airflow escapes through the nose and not the mouth. This is the M in a hymn. Plosive is where all airflow ceases. This is the P in pack. Fricative is where the air is forced through a narrow channel in the mouth, with two areas of articulation getting close together. This is the Z in zoo. Approximate is similar to fricative, but with more area between the two articulators. This is the th in this. Tap flap is where one articulator is thrown against the other. This is the R in throw. Trill is where vibrations occur between the two articulators. Trills are not used in common English, but sometimes in accents like Northumbrian. As I mentioned earlier, non-pulmonic consonants do not use airflow from the lungs and are much rarer than pulmonic consonants. Non-pulmonic consonants consist of implosives, where the glottis moves downward and creates a stop consonant, ejectives, where the glottis is lowered, closed, and then reopened, and clicks, which are just what they sound like. No non-pulmonic consonants are used in actual words in English. Examples of non-pulmonic consonants can be found in many South African languages, and if you want to hear examples of them, you can check out the IPA charts in the description. The other half of phonetics, besides consonants, is vowels, which have a totally different chart, as vowels are not produced in a certain place or in a certain manner. The chart is instead based on the position of the tongue, with the top showing how far or back the tongue is from the mouth, and the sides showing the height of the tongue, with vowels higher up having the tongue closer to the roof, and vowels lower having the tongue closer to the base. Along with the vowels in this chart, diphthongs are also used in the IPA to show a combination of two adjacent vowels in a syllable. Other phonetic details can be represented using diacritics, such as the ones shown in this chart. Along with the IPA, many languages are tonal languages, where certain phonemes can be given different tones to change the meaning. All languages use tone or pitch to demonstrate certain meanings, like questions in English, but certain languages use tones much more in general, like Chinese and Vietnamese. For tonal languages, diacritics are used for the IPA to represent tones. This overview of the IPA is by no means a full picture of phonetics, but gives a general idea of what is needed to see the differences between phonemes and languages. In linguistic typology, phonetics is used to find languages that have similar phonetics, along with similar consonant and vowel libraries, to help define what languages are related to each other. This is an example of the English phonetic library. As you can see, English has many labial, alveolar, velar, fricative, and plosive consonants. The vowels heavily depend on the accent. The General American has many mid-range and back vowels, along with few diphthongs. Morphology focuses on words and how they are formed by morphemes, which are the smallest subdivision of language that still exhibits meaning. Every word is made up of a combination of morphemes. Typological morphology tries to differentiate languages into different ways that morphemes are put together to form words. These different types of morphology are largely distinguished on how many word forms one lexeme has. A lexeme is a set of word forms that are all based on the same base word. In English, a lexeme would be the word forms of eat, eats, eaten, and ate, where they are all talking about the action of consuming food and look very similar, but each have slightly different meanings. In Spanish, any conjugation of the same verb would be a word form of that lexeme. For example, jugar, juegue, jugo, and jugadora. If you, like me, have learned both English and Spanish, you will already know that possibly the largest difference between the two languages is that every verb in Spanish has to be conjugated, while this idea is mostly missing from English. This shows the difference between the two general categories of typological morphology: analytic and synthetic. There are analytic languages, which have a low ratio of morphemes per word, and where each word has little morphological change or inflections. This means that grammatical categories such as plural and past tense often has their own words, such as many in English. This reveals how English is only partially analytic, as it does have specific words for plural, like some and many, but also uses the inflection of the S at the end of the word to exhibit plurals. This is more similar to the other type of morphology I will mention later. An even more extreme version of an analytical language are isolating languages, which usually only have one morpheme per word. This includes languages like Yoruba and Vietnamese. Other analytical languages like English and Chinese are not isolating, as they have compound words made of many morphemes, but are still considered analytical languages because they have little inflections in their words. The majority of analytical languages are in East Asia, which can be largely attributed to the Chinese writing system, which somewhat forces languages to be isolating because each symbol represents one word and makes morphological change difficult. Other languages that are analytic include many Austronesian languages, West African languages, English, North Germanic languages, and to some degree Khoisan languages. For examples of analytic languages, I will use English and Chinese. This language reads, "We went to the grocery store to get a large amount of food." This shows how English is largely analytic because each word is short and has few morphemes. Also, it shows how totally new words are formed to show past tense, as went is a past tense of go and has no relation to go. But it also shows how English does form multiple morpheme words like grocery and amount.
他走出了房间。
This sentence means he walked out of the room. This sentence reveals the analytical nature of Chinese, as the first character means he, the second walk, the third out, and the fourth means finish, which in this case is a separate word used to denote that he had walked out instead of is presently walking out. Even though each character is only one syllable, in spoken form, you can see that Chinese also forms compound words. The other overarching category of typological morphology are synthetic languages. As opposed to analytical languages, synthetic languages usually have languages with more morphemes, and instead of having individual words for grammatical categories like gender and tense, fusional languages use affixes, which are additions or changes to the beginning, middle, or end of a root word to convey this information instead. This creates longer words that have more meaning in each of them. Synthetic languages are themselves divided into three distinct types of languages: agglutinative, fusional, and polysynthetic. Agglutinative languages are a form of synthetic languages that form words by stringing together morphemes that don't change very much. This means, in agglutinative languages, grammatical categories ranging from tense to gender to possession to location all have one morpheme that represents them that remains unchanged whenever put at the end of a root word. This makes words in agglutinative languages usually some of the most recognizable of any typological morphology because they have a consistent system. This is unlike analytical languages, where entire new words are created for grammatical categories, or fusional languages, where it can be hard to tell what each affix means. Many languages fall in a continuum between agglutinative and fusional, but languages that are considered agglutinative are the Uralic languages, the Turkic languages, the Dravidian languages, the Bantu languages, the Nilo-Saharan languages, many Native American languages, Japanese, Korean, and many Philippine languages. For examples of agglutinative languages, I will use Turkish and Hungarian.
Sevdim. Sevmedim. Severim. Sevmem.
These Turkish words are a good example of agglutination because in each of them, sev means like or to like, while each of them has a ending that changes the meaning. In the first word, the d means past tense, and the means first person singular, making a meaning of I liked. In the second word, the me means not, the d means past tense, and the m means first person singular, giving a meaning of I did not like. For the third word, the means present tense, and the means first person singular, giving a meaning of I like. And then the last word, the may means not, and the means first person singular, giving a meaning of I do not like.
Kertek. Kertemben. Kertjeinkból.
These Hungarian words also show agglutination, as the kert means garden, and in the first word, the ending ek means plural, giving a meaning of gardens. In the second word, the m means possession, and the ben means location, giving the meaning of in my garden. And in the last word, the ye means his or her, the ink our, and the bull direction, meaning from our gardens. Both of these examples show how for every word, there is a root word that the meaning stays constant, while similar looking endings are added on, each having the same meaning in each word, as in the in Turkish always meaning first person singular, no matter what word it is in, and not changing very much. Fusional languages are another form of synthetic languages which are similar to agglutinative languages, except that instead of stringing together multiple morphemes, each with a different grammatical meaning, fusional languages can combine multiple grammatical meanings into one morpheme. For example, the morpheme a in Spanish combines the grammatical concepts of first person, singular, and preterite, one type of past tense. These morphemes are usually applied in the form of affixes. Because of the combined grammatical meaning of one of the affixes, fusional languages can be somewhat confusing, as it can be difficult to tell what a word it means just by looking at the affix. Most Indo-European languages are considered fusional, along with the Afro-Asiatic languages and some Native American languages, like the Oto-Mongolian family. For examples of fusional languages, I will use Spanish and Arabic.
Como. Comimos. Comi. Comia.
For these Spanish words, we can see how fusional languages have affixes that have multiple meanings for one morpheme. In como, the o means singular and first person. In comimos, the imos means plural and we. In comi, the e means singular, first person, and preterite past tense. And encomia, the ia, means singular, first person, and imperfect past tense.
كتب. كتبت. أكتب.
Arabic is another example of a fusional language, as the first word just means wrote or he wrote, as the he is implied, while in the second word, the t sound on the end is from the symbol at the start of the word, as Arabic is written right to left. And this symbol means third person, feminine, and singular, all at the same time. While in the third word, the sound of the word is totally changed, but only one symbol is added on, which means singular, present tense. The final type of synthetic languages are polysynthetic languages. Polysynthetic languages are languages that have high morpheme to word ratios, where words are made up of many morphemes that cannot necessarily stand on their own. Polysynthetic languages are also famous for sentence words, or words that combine enough meaning together to effectively create a sentence. It can be difficult to define a language as polysynthetic, as its only real defining trait is words with large amount of morphemes, and there is no distinct cutoff. Out of all the ways of typological morphology, polysynthetic languages are by far the rarest and mostly concentrated in Native American languages. Language families considered polysynthetic include the Pama-Nyung of Native Australians, Northwest Caucasian, Mayan, Mapuche, Na-Dene, and Inuit. For examples of polysynthetic languages, I will use Yupik. The word I use for Yupik is real, but is also not how most words in Yupik work and is extreme to prove the point of polysynthetic languages. This long word is a sentence in itself, and it means he had not yet said again that he was going to hunt reindeer. The tuntu means reindeer. The sur means hunt. The qatar means future tense. The ni means say. The khasate means negative. The nksite means again. And the uk means third person singular and indicative mood. The only morpheme in this word that can stand on its own is tuntu, meaning that the rest of these are effectively affixes to the word tuntu. To close off typological morphology, I want to remind you that no rule in linguistics is absolute, and that definitely goes for typological morphology. No language is fully analytical or fully agglutinative, and all languages take a little bit from each. Even though the distinction between different categories of typological morphology can be vague, seeing how languages build their words can be very helpful to find relationships between languages. Another subcategory of morphology is gender and noun classes. Gender and noun classes are somewhat less useful for finding linguistic connections, as many of the world languages do not have gender or noun classes. Gender specifically is only really present in Indo-European and Afro-Asiatic languages, whereas most of the world's languages distinguish between gender using specific words similar to he and she in English. Noun classes, on the other hand, are to some degree used by almost all languages, but in very different ways. For example, many East Asian languages use noun classifiers, which are separate words and do not actually change the words in any way. For example, in Chinese, noun classifiers are required when counting or identifying nouns. In Chinese, when counting nouns, number goes first, then the noun classifier associated with the type of noun, such as books or animals, then the actual noun. As opposed to noun classifiers, noun classes are a system where the nouns themselves change depending on what is classifying them. Starting with gender class systems, there are actually 3 different systems of gender class around the world, with most languages using gender being Indo-European. The least common gender system is the one used in Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and some dialects of Norwegian. This system groups male and female into one class called common, and inanimate objects into a class called neuter. So with all gender systems, the nouns themselves rarely change, but the indefinite articles, words such as it or the, and adjectives change. This shows how gender systems are not a full noun class system, but in some cases nouns themselves do still change. For an example of a common neuter gender class system, I will use Dutch.
De tafel. Het huis.
In this example, the first set of words means the table and is considered to be common gender, with the indefinite article da meaning the for common gender. The second set of words means the house, which is considered neuter gender and uses the indefinite article het for the. As you can see in this example, many gender systems seem to defy logic, as in Dutch, the table is considered common gender and the house is considered neuter. The next type of gender system is very similar, but instead of combining male and female into a common gender, they have three genders of male, female, and neuter. Similarly to the previous gender system, mostly the indefinite articles and adjectives change, not the actual nouns. This system is used by German, Greek, Romanian, Norwegian, Icelandic, some Dravidian languages, and the Slavic languages. For an example of this system, I will use Russian.
Большой стол. Большая книга. Большое море.
In this example, the first set of words means big table and is in masculine gender. The second set of words means big book and is in feminine gender. And the third set of words means big C and is in neuter gender. As you can see, the adjective meaning big after all of these words is different depending on what gender it is. The final type of gender is probably the one that is most familiar and simply just distinguishes between male and female. As with all gender systems, the gender of many nouns can seem arbitrary. The genders used by the Romance languages, excluding Romanian, the Baltic languages, Armenian, many of the Indo-Aryan languages, and the Afro-Asiatic languages. For an example of this system, I will use Latvian.
Garš zēns. Gara meitene.
Similar to the other gender systems, the adjective before the noun changes depending on if it is masculine or feminine, with the first set of words in this example meaning tall boy and considered being masculine, and the second set of words being tall girl, considered feminine. Another type of noun class system is where languages distinguish between animate beings and inanimate objects. In its most pure form, the only languages that use this system are in the Algonquian languages and Mapuche. In these languages, animacy can affect plural endings and morphology. A system which is very similar to animacy is a system used in some Dravidian languages, as well as Sinhala, which use a rational versus irrational system, which is very similar, where humans and gods are rational, and where plants and objects are irrational. For example of animation systems, I will use Tamil.
ஆண் வந்தான். வந்தது.
In this example, the first set of words means the man came, while the second set of words means it came, and they have different endings depending on if they are considered rational, as in the man came, or irrational, as in it came. Finally, some languages have extremely diverse noun class systems that classify nouns based on many different categories. The two language families most famous for a noun class system like this are the Northeast Caucasian languages and especially the Bantu languages. The Northeast Caucasian languages have classes for female humans, male humans, non-human animates, inanimates, and sometimes more depending on what language. The Bantu class system works by changing a noun prefix depending on what class it belongs to. Classes are often broken down by different categories of object by plural and singular. Most Bantu languages have between 15 and 18 noun classes, and this is the defining aspect of a Bantu language. For an example, I will use Swahili.
Mtu mzuri. Watu wazuri. Kisu kikubwa. Visu vikubwa.
In this example, the first set of words means good person, while the second set of words means good people. As you can see, both the beginning of the noun and the adjective change depending on if they are plural or singular. The third set of words means big knife, while the fourth set of words means big knives. As you can see, these new noun classes change the beginning of the noun and the adjective while still distinguishing between plural and singular. The third and final category of linguistic typology is syntax. Syntax focuses on the way in which words are ordered in a sentence after the words have already been formed. The main aspect of syntactic typology is dominant word order, or the way words are usually ordered in any given language. Word order is based on the order in which the subject, verb, and object are placed in a sentence. The subject is the person or thing about what the sentence is made, and is usually the one that is controlling the verb. The verb is the word that conveys an action, and it is what is actually happening in the sentence. The verb is often what the subject is doing to or with the object. The object is the person or thing that is being affected by the subject. For a basic English example, I will use the sentence, "The cat ate the fish." In this instance, the cat is the subject, as it is what the sentence is based around and is the one doing the action. The verb is ate, as it is the action being done on the object by the subject. The fish is the object, as it is what the verb is being done towards. The idea of subject, verb, and object works great for simple English sentences, but for more complex sentences and certain languages, the system begins to fall apart. But in general, most languages can be grouped into one of 6 orders of the subject, verb, and object. The most recognizable word order for English speakers is the subject, verb, object, or SVO, which is used in English and contains around 40% of languages. For examples of all word orders, I will use the English sentence, "John drove the car." This is, of course, the correct word order for SVO languages. This word order is used by all languages in Europe, excluding the Celtic languages and Hungarian, as well as the Semitic and Chadic languages, the Sinitic or Chinese languages, the Tai-Kadai languages, most of the Austroasiatic languages, and some of the Austronesian languages. The most common word order, by number of languages spoken, is subject, object, verb, or SOV, which is used by around 45% of languages. This would change the sentence to, "John the car drove." This order is used by the Indo-Iranian languages, Turkic languages, Mongolic languages, Cushitic languages, Tibeto-Burman languages, and many more. The next most common word order is a verb, subject, object, or VSO, with around 10% of languages using it. This order would change the sentence to, "Drove John the car." The Austronesian languages in the Philippines, as well as most Polynesian languages, use this order, along with the Mayan and Celtic languages. This is also the order used by modern Standard Arabic, but is not usually the spoken variety with which most Arabic speakers use. The final word order used by any decent number of languages is verb, object, subject, or VOS, used by around 3% of languages. The order of the sentence would be changed to, "Drove the car John." The most important languages using this order are Fijian, Malagasy, and the Odo-Manguean language family. The 2 remaining word orders are extremely uncommon, with object, verb, subject, or OVS, containing less than 1% of languages. This would change the sentence to, "The car drove John." The most spoken language using this order is Iwu in the Eastern Solomon Islands with around 8,000 speakers. The final word order is object, subject, verb, or OSV, with very few languages using it. This would change the sentence to, "The car John drove." The only language with more than a couple hundred speakers using this is Warao, with around 30,000 speakers. Another factor in linguistic typology is morphosyntactic alignment, which has a lot to do with syntax, but also has a factor of morphology. Morphosyntactic alignment is the relationship between the subject and the object in a sentence. Morphosyntactic alignment revolves around the idea of transitive and intransitive verbs. An intransitive verb is a verb which only deals with the subject of a sentence. A transitive verb is a verb which connects the subject to the object. For example, in the sentence, "I sneezed," or the sentence, "Babies cry," sneezed and cry are intransitive verbs, as they only deal with the objects I and babies. But in the sentences, "The cat chased the rat," or "The man ate an apple," the verbs chased and ate are transitive verbs, as they transition between the cat and the man, or the subject, and the object of the rat or the apple. To classify different types of morphosyntactic alignment, there are usually 3 cases that are used. The sole, or S, is the subject of an intransitive verb, like in yellow. The agent, or A, is the subject of a transitive verb, in blue. And the object, or O, is the object of a transitive verb, in green. There are two main types of morphosyntactic alignment: nominative accusative and ergative absolutive. In nominative accusative alignment, the S and A, or the subjects of either a transitive or intransitive verb, are treated the same, while the object of a transitive verb is treated differently. The S and A are called the nominative case, while the O is called the accusative case. In English, the only time where this affects grammar is when using pronouns, such as in the sentences he slept and he saw him. In these sentences, the he and he slept and he saw are treated the same, while the him and he saw him is treated differently. In all these cases, he effectively means the same thing as another male person, but him is treated differently because it is the object of a transitive verb instead of the subject. For another example, I will use Turkish.
Ben gördüm. Ben gördüm beni.
In this example, the first sentence means I saw, while the second sentence means I saw myself. In both these sentences, the words I and myself effectively mean the same thing, as they are talking about you, the speaker. While in both cases, Ben, the subject of the sentence, does not have any suffix, while Benny, the object of the sentence, does have a suffix, as that is the way to differentiate between the nominative and accusative alignments in Turkish. The nominative accusative alignment is by far the most prevalent and is used by most languages on Earth. Instead of listing all the languages using it, I will list the languages using the other alignments when I mention them. And if a language isn't mentioned, you can assume it uses the nominative accusative alignment. The other main morphosyntactic alignment is ergative absolutive. In this alignment, the S and O, or the subject of an intransitive and the object of a transitive, are treated the same, while A, or the subject of a transitive, is treated differently. S and O are called the absolutive case, while A is called the ergative case. For an example of this alignment, I will use Basque.
Gizona etorri da. Gizonak mutila ikusi du.
In this example, the first sentence means the man came, and the second sentence means the man saw the boy. The word for the man, gizona, in the first sentence, and the word for the boy, mutila, in the second sentence, are treated the same, as they are the subject of the intransitive verb and the object of the transitive verb, or both in the absolutive case. For Basque, this is shown through the addition of the a suffix at the end of the word. The word for the man in the second sentence, gizonak, is instead having a suffix of ak, as it is in the ergative case, or the subject of an intransitive verb. The ergative absolutive alignment is used in many Native American languages, such as the Chibchan languages, Eskimo Aleut languages, and Mayan languages. It is also used in some languages in the Tibetan Plateau, like Tibetan and Assamese, most Australian Aboriginal languages, and many languages in New Guinea. Some languages also exhibit limited ergativity, like Hindi and Georgian, which use the alignment in certain cases. For the rest of the types of morphosyntactic alignment, I will briefly say what they are and what languages use them, but not cover any examples of them. There is active stative alignment, where the S is sometimes treated the same as the A, and sometimes treated the same as the O. This is used in many Native American languages like Guarani, the Swiwen languages, and the Iroquoian languages. Symmetrical voice systems have both the accusative and ergative type alignments in transitive verbs, and use affixes in words to show which. This type is used in many Austronesian languages, especially centered around the Philippines. With syntax covered, we've effectively covered all of linguistic typology. Through finding similarities in the phonology, morphology, and syntax of languages, we can find how languages are related to one another. This is helpful in building connections for language families, and is especially helpful for describing what makes a language family a language family. With linguistic typology explained, you know what the building blocks of language are. But this entire time, I have been showing different languages with different writing systems, and I figure I should explain another extremely important part of the structure of language. For most people watching this video, you likely use the Latin alphabet, but have also probably seen other writing systems. Maybe you saw Russian written, or Arabic, or Hindi, or Chinese, and wondered how that works. Well, in general, it might be more similar to the Latin alphabet than you think. First, I will cover the two writing systems that really aren't that similar to the Latin alphabet. These would be syllabaries and logographies. Syllabaries are just like what they sound like, and are writing systems where each symbol represents a syllable. For a writing system, this means that every vowel has a symbol of it combined with every consonant. Often, two symbols based off the same vowel don't look similar at all and are totally separate symbols. This leads syllabaries to have large number of symbols, with Japanese hiragana having upwards of 50. The only major language that uses syllabaries are Japanese, which has 2 syllabaries, and Cherokee. Logographies, on the other hand, are a set of symbols that each describe either a word or a component of language. This, of course, leads to a massive number of symbols, with around 5,000 Chinese characters usually being known by a native speaker. Some of the earliest systems of writing were logographies, such as Egyptian hieroglyphs. Actually, all 4 of the independently invented writing systems started out as logographic, with Egyptian hieroglyphs, cuneiform, Chinese script, and Mesoamerican scripts. Today, though, the only languages that still use logographies are all the Chinese languages and Japanese, as Japanese has both a logography and 2 syllabary writing systems. Both logographies and syllabaries are conceptually simple, as syllable sounds are natural, and logograms literally just mean what they say. But in both cases, and especially for logographies, the difficulty comes in the number of symbols that need to be memorized for literacy. The other 3 writing systems are similar to the Latin alphabet because they can all be considered alphabets themselves. An alphabet is a writing system which has a set of symbols, called letters, that are used to represent a certain sound. Letters represent phonemes, or a single sound, as opposed to syllables, like in syllabaries. All alphabets began with Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were actually a logography. Then in around 1800 BC, it is likely that workers from the Levant adapted Egyptian hieroglyphs into a small amount of symbols on the Sinai Peninsula. And these symbols would then spread through the Levant, and eventually around 1000 BC, the Phoenician alphabet was born, which is possibly the most important writing system in history, as quite possibly every major writing system except for Chinese and Japanese evolved from this. At this point, Phoenician was specifically an abjad, which I will explain now. An abjad is an alphabetic writing system that doesn't have any vowels. They only have consonants, and vowels are inferred. In practice, though, most abjads are actually impure and use diacritics to represent some vowels. For example, I will use Arabic and Hebrew.
كتاب محيط شالوم.
As you can see, these words are composed almost fully of consonants, with mostly just small symbols representing vowels, if any are even used at all. After the Phoenician alphabet was created, languages began to adopt a system similar to it, and importantly, Aramaic adopted a system similar. The Aramaic writing system eventually was adopted by Arabic, and when Arabic became the language of the Quran, it spread around the world. Today, Arabic is the main language that uses an abjad, but other languages do, such as Hebrew, Persian, Urdu, and Uyghur. As Aramaic became important and its influence spread, it is possible that it influenced the writing systems in the Indian subcontinent and led to the creation of the next writing system, called Abugidas. An abugida could be considered the transition between an abjad and a true alphabet. In an abugida, the base of a letter is composed of a consonant. Each consonant has an inherent vowel, which can be changed by using a diacritic, changing the shape of the consonant, or rotating the consonant. The way in which it is changed depends on the language. This is different than an abjad, as every vowel is represented in some way, and different from a syllabary, as consonant and vowel notations are separate. For example, I will use Hindi using the Devanagari script and the Thai script. In Hindi, the Devanagari script is used, and in this word in Hindi, the first letter is composed of the base consonant symbol, which means a K consonant, and the symbol before it means a short I vowel. The second letter is composed of the base consonant, which means the T consonant, and the symbol after it, which means a long A vowel. The final letter in the word is just the B consonant. In this word in Thai, the first letter is silent and changes the tone of the word, as Thai is a tonal language. The second letter is built up of the base consonant, meaning the N consonant, and the symbol above it represents a short A vowel. The third letter is just a consonant and represents the NG consonant. The fourth letter is built up of the S consonant, and the symbol above it means a long W vowel. Abugidas are used mostly in South Asia, with dozens of different abugidas for different languages in countries from India to Indonesia. The largest of these South Asian writing systems is Devanagari, which is used for Hindi and many similar languages. Other abugidas include Gayaz to write Amharic, and Canadian abugidas used to write Native American languages like Cree and Inuktitut. Going back to Phoenicia, if we go west, we have a little civilization called Greece that had just lost writing. The previous civilization had used a syllabary, and these new Greeks decided to steal the Phoenician alphabet, but they created letters for vowels. This Greek alphabet was eventually adapted into the Latin alphabet, and from these two alphabets, most modern true alphabets descended. A true alphabet has equal representation for vowels and consonants. For examples, I will use in Russian. In this Russian word, the first letter means the I vowel, the second letter the O vowel, the third letter the SH consonant sound, the fourth letter the A vowel, and the fifth letter the D consonant sound. From Greek came the Armenian, Georgian, and Cyrillic alphabets, and the Latin alphabet through colonialism spread all across the world. Other true alphabets include Mongolian, Neo-Tifinagh, or Berber, Osage, as well as Korean, which is sometimes thought to be a syllabary, but because it follows a consistent pattern where every consonant and vowel always look the same, it is considered an alphabet. Language is the most basic thing that unites all humans, and is part of what allowed humans to become the species that rules the world. But actually looking deep into what language is made of shows how incredibly complicated language really is. The range of ways to make sounds, words, sentences, and how to write those words down is astounding. Every language is slightly different to the one right next to it, and if you travel a couple thousand miles, you could get a language effectively alien or pretty similar to the language you were just looking at. I think language is fascinating, and I hope after watching this video you do too.